You're watching Just Politics, Our Worldview, live on Facebook every Sunday from 5 p.m. till 7. It's the podcast about politics in Barbados, the region, and the wider world. Now, here are your hosts, Ayo and Terry.
Welcome back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Just Politics on our World View. I am your host, Ayo Olalara, with my co-host, Dr. Terry Harris. And today we'll be discussing the topic, Dancing with Giants, CARICOM and Cuba in a Multipolar World. Terry?
Thanks, Ayo. All right, so tonight we have a special episode for you as we will discuss the CARICOM, Cuba, USA triangular crisis that is now plaguing the Caribbean, the history of the US blockade of Cuba, known on the island as El Bloqueo, is a 6-year evolution of economic maximum pressure that has become a long-running trade embargo in recent modern history. It began as a limited arms embargo under President Eisenhower in 1958 through the Cuban Revolution, and escalated into a comprehensive trade ban in 1962 under the Castro government because they were nationalized over $1 billion in U.S. assets and oil refineries on the island. While the blockade was briefly loosened during the Cuban thaw of 2015, it has since become aggressively tightened starting in January 2026 under the National Emergency Declaration by President Donald Trump. This most recent phase marked a shift from bilateral trade ban to a global deterrent using Executive Order 14380 to threaten any third-party nation that provides oil to the island with steep U.S. tariffs and, of course, other things as well. This has effectively moved the blockade Cuba, moved the blockade of Cuba from a Cold War relic to a 2026 geopolitical weapon designed to isolate Cuba, their energy grid, and force a total economic collapse of the island. Joining us tonight is Tahir Balbula to help us unpack how CARICOM can navigate this crisis. Tahir is a Barbados Youth Ambassador, prominent youth leader, and has been awarded the Pride of Barbados National Award for his commitment to youth. Tahir, welcome to the show.
Hi, Terry. Hi, Iowa. Happy to be on the program, and I'm looking forward to this evening's discussion. And it's a big topic to unpack in a very challenging time.
Welcome, Tahir. Thank you, Terry. I want to remind the viewers that they can call into the show by sending a WhatsApp to 833-9886. Y'all asked me for this feature, yet you don't use it. Also, follow, and share here on Facebook and on YouTube. And remember that Facebook deletes live videos, but you can rewatch all of our lives on YouTube at JPOWS7EP8. Now, this past year, following on from what Terry was saying, this past year has been one of the most volatile for the Cuba, CARICOM, U.S. triangle in decades. The relationship is currently defined by a maximum pressure campaign from Washington and a desperate humanitarian rescue mission from the Caribbean. The U.S. Oil blockade and the economic pressure has really been taking a toll. The most significant shift occurred on January 29th, 2026, when U.S. President Donald Trump signed the executive order, which is 14380. The order threatens to impose steep tariffs on any country that directly or indirectly provides oil to Cuba. This has paralyzed Cuba's electrical grid, leading to nationwide collapses and blackouts in early 2026. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated openly, and he's Cuban descent, by the way, as you guys know, that the goal is to force dramatic reforms and a shift toward private sector-led economy by the end of 2026. CARICOM, in response to the collapsing situation in Havana, the leaders took a historic stand during the 50th regular meeting. This was on February 24th to 27th to this year in St. Kitts and Nevis. CARICOM chairman Dr. Terence Drew announced a coordinated humanitarian effort. Member states are pooling funds to send basic food stuff like powdered milk, baby formula, medical supplies, and even solar panels to the island. Since direct shipping from some ports is risky due to US sanctions, Mexico has stepped in to provide free shipping and logistics for CARICOM's aid. While the bloc agreed on aid, there are some visible cracks. Some leaders, like Barbados' Mia Motley, moved with to send supplies independently, while others appeared more cautious following a meeting with Marco Rubio during the summit. And a pivotal moment occurred at that summit. This was in February 2026, when Secretary of State Marco Rubio attended said summit. Rubio argued that the US is not the impediment, but that the Cuban government's failed model is. He offered CARICOM a new 21st century cooperation framework to replace the 1983 Caribbean Basin Initiative, essentially dangling trade and security perks in exchange for regional alignment. The US has already removed some reciprocal tariffs on CARICOM exports as long as late 2025 to signal that being a valued partner pays off. And China and Russia have intensified ties with Cuba over the past year. Russia's Novacom Bank has formalized operations in Havana, and China has held high-level policy seminars to help Cuba manage its economic transition. Despite the rhetoric, President Diaz-Canel confirmed on March 13th this year that initial exchanges are taking place with the Trump administration to find space for understanding and avoid total confrontation. So that's where we are. So let's look first at the split in CARICOM. Tahir, I'm gonna pose the first question to you because you're our only guest. Trinidad and Tobago recently became the only CARICOM member to opt out of the collective aid mission to Cuba, choosing an independent path. Is this a pragmatic move to protect Trinidad and Tobago's energy interests with the US, or is it the beginning of the end for a unified CARICOM foreign policy? What are your thoughts?
Well, we gotta take everything into context since the Kamala Prasad Bassasar's administration has taken power. It has been clear their approach on what foreign policy route they will take, especially as it relates to CARICOM. We know the Honorable Prime Minister from Trinidad position as it relates to CARICOM when she was Prime Minister previously as well. She took certain stances then. So I'm personally not surprised now by the stances that she's taken. What is unfortunate is that when she was previously in power, it is a totally different world now. What is taking place in the Middle East, what is taking place in Venezuela at the beginning of the year, what is taking place in Cuba, what is taking place in Gaza, what is taking place across the entire world, which is being led by the US and Israel. It is a clear step. For me personally, I would have preferred that CARICOM had a unified stance, but at the CARICOM heads of government meeting in February, she essentially shot some she let go some shots, if you could call it that. At the meeting, she
What
played
type of
lots of
shots?
shots
Shot,
actually.
shot,
Lots of shots.
tequila. Was it tequila? Was it rum? What type of shots you talking about?
Shot after shot.
Okay.
We could call it cricket shots, drinking
Oh, cricket
shots,
shots.
whatever
Right.
shots. It was enough shots that was played at that meeting. But all jokes aside, is that I think with her stance, that is a challenge to CARICOM. It is a
Mm,
definite challenge to CARICOM. The world is seeing what is happening. The people of the region are seeing what is happening across the world, and people are standing up and people are speaking out. Is that the position of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? All the citizens? I'm not sure. But I'm glad to see that the Barbadian government has taken a specific stance. I'm not surprised by it, but we really have to educate ourselves, especially as it relates to the colonial powers that are still roaming the world today and seeking to take over. We saw the Shield of America summit, the countries that were invited from the region there as well. So we can't even believe that it is just March, and so much has happened this year already. So I'm not surprised by the stance taken by the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad, but it is very definitely worrying for the region. But I am sure that we as a region can unite the countries that have stood firm for Cuba will continue to stand firm for Cuba, and that is clear in our foreign policy.
Mhm. Terry, I'm gonna hand over to you. What do you think? Is it does it further split CARICOM, or is it the first crack really? Because I mean CARICOM has been pretty together on most things. Most things. We never had a such a blatant move away from our foreign policy.
Yeah. I think it is a crack. Of course, there could be differences of opinion, but CARICOM is supposed to have a unified foreign policy, as we know, and we don't. We have members who are doing their own thing in the spirit of one from 10 leaves not very Trinidadian thing to do. Although I don't think that this move represents the will and the opinion of most Trinidadian people. I've not done a poll, but I don't think Trinidadians actually support most Trinidadians. Of course, many do, and the Prime Minister there is representing some views on Trinidad, but I don't think they are the lion's share of views on Trinidad. But it would be better if we had, obviously, we're very small states, not really impactful in terms of population, in terms of trade. It's important for us to stand together and have a unified voice in these international fora if we are going to progress our interests. So this is what I think. I think is a bit unfortunate. People are, in Barbados parlance, I would say they're bracking for the South, trying to look out for their own better interests, and I think it might be very short-sighted because, of course, the Trump administration is not going to be here forever. Thank God for that. And things will change, and then when things change, people have to adjust. And so, but of course, we will always remember this particular point in time wherein decisions were taken that were not consistent with our collective opinion of collective interests.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things I keep saying. Like, right now, when we talk about in terms of U.S. presidents, there are so many most temporary people, temporary leaders around the world. So it's kind of but it is what it is. What we do know is that Prime Minister Bissessar, she's been very vocal about her support for President Trump's operation. The absolute, what's it? Operation Absolute
I can't keep
Resolve.
up.
Really,
There's the
yeah, there are too many, and then
Thai
the US,
Fury going on now, and a whole host of
yeah,
other
which was
very
but
strange.
Absolute Resolve was the U.S. Military transits through Trinidad and Tobago. What I want to ask you guys, I'm gonna go back to Tahir. This Law and Order alliance with Washington, does it make the Trinidadian leader rather a leader in regional security within the Caribbean, or does it make Trinidad a vassal state in the eyes of their Caribbean neighbors?
In the eyes of the Caribbean, I would say that I think the leaders or the countries have perhaps several Trinidad's out there on their own. Even the stance taken by Guyana, for example. Guyana's like, okay, you over there with your decisions, we're not agreeing with everything that you're essentially saying. Guyana has more taken that middle ground approach. We know the relationship Guyana has with Venezuela. We know the relationship Guyana has with Cuba. But from a regional standpoint, it is concerning. And going back to your initial point, Ayo and Terry mentioned it as well, that, and this is my sometimes my challenge with CARICOM. Does CARICOM truly capture the voice or the want of the people of the region? And that is where
Mm-hmm.
my challenge often comes in.
Mm-hmm.
How, and I know CARICOM stands as a policy making body for the region. But how do you essentially capture those voices beyond the government views, or the persons who have been put there to lead? I know it's the expectation of the government to capture the voices of as many people as possible within your country so that then you form your own positions or your own policies. But that has been my challenge with CARICOM in some instances where I do not feel the average person on the streets opinion or the widespread opinion in a specific country is often treasured. So from that standpoint, that is where I would say Trinidad perhaps is on their own on that side. And you spoke
And if
about.
and not to cross you, but if we think about because there've been numerous marches and stuff in Trinidad by the people speaking out, they're marching on the US embassy there and so forth. So I think that I agree with you in that the leadership is not capturing what the people want in Trinidad right now. But continue.
Yeah, no, no, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct, and that is where then the voice. And for me, as a just let's take politics out of it. Let's take all the conversation around. Let's just be humans. Let's look at the state of Cuba today. Let
Hmm.
us look at the state of the hospitals in Cuba. Babies burning, one day electricity on in some areas. It is a challenge upon people. Food, access to water. These are basic rights to human beings. Where the bodies that where the entities that are supposed to be calling out against these things. So if as a human being we cannot see this fundamental challenge for our fellow human beings, then something is fundamentally wrong with our thinking. And I'll leave that there for now.
Mhm.
I can't say that I disagree. Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, so to the question, is it a vassal? I would have to say at this point, yeah, is made itself into a tool for American foreign policy adventures in our part of the world,
Hmm.
and that's not where Trinidad. I'm pretty sure that's not where the majority of Trinidadians will like Trinidad to position itself within the region, and of course position its foreign policy to have its foreign policy be essentially subjected or subsumed, overridden with foreign policy of a Donald Trump administration. Are you serious, Trinidad? So anyway, so that's where I see it at this point. They played a role in the um, illegal attack on Venezuela and what happened there. Of course, we know the relationship between Venezuela and Guyana, Venezuela and Trinidad. It's not always the best, but you're always going to be next to Trinidad. You're always going to be next to Venezuela if you're Trinidad, right? You're not going to move. And of course, the American military could always pack up and go home. And then what happens next? So I think they're positioned, to answer your question, they position themselves as a vassal. They're not the only ones. Many other states around the world have positioned themselves as vassals and have subjugated their foreign policy and maybe their own interests to American foreign policy adventures. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this right now in the Middle East with respect to the Gulf states, who have probably not, well, they would not wanted the invasion perhaps of Iran, but of course the American foreign policy interest has decided that's what they're going to do, and they're subjected to the consequences. And of course, we don't want anything like that to happen in our part of the world, and we don't want any blowback to Trinidad. But Trinidad has to be careful because, of course, at the end of the day, America can always pack up and head home.
So you're saying American can pack up and go home, but America can pack up and take over or try to take over too.
Well, I mean, they always they've been trying to take over many areas
So I'm more
when they fail.
concerned. I am more concerned about the pack up and take over than the pack up and go home. You
Okay.
understand? We
Yeah.
see, we see what's happening, and we as a Caribbean people have to truly educate ourselves. Just this week, we heard about the vote at the UN Assembly, which was brought forth by Ghana, and the UN Assembly voted that the Atlantic slave trade was the gravest crime against humanity.
Mhm.
And who was impacted the most from the Atlantic slave trade? Us in the region. And who were the three countries that voted against? And then who were the 52 that did not
Abstain.
vote, that abstained from voting? So it is the same playbook being played over and over and over again. And this is where now we have to truly educate ourselves and really we're just educate ourselves.
And pay attention to what's happening, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tahir. But let me not picking up for anybody. I'm just putting it out there. Given Trinidad's reliance on the United States for licenses for the Dragon gas field, um, have they effectively been backed into a corner where they must choose between regional solidarity and traditional economic survival? Is that their position? Can we Are we giving them that, or are we not giving them that?
What are you advocating for the devil?
I'm just asking. I'm not advocating for anything. You know my position on this, but I'm
I
asking a
know
question.
you're playing devil's advocate. I know. We appreciate the question, but I guess if I could go first on that one, I don't think they've been backed into anything. I think this is pretty much their choice. If smaller, more open economies are much more sensitive to U.S. foreign policy and decisions made there, like Barbados, can try to forge a middle path and not necessarily come down on one side or the other, but definitely stand up for human rights in the instance of not wanting war in the region, wanting the Caribbean region to remain a zone of peace, in the instance of being against the blockade of Cuba and against what's happening there. And Barbados has a long history of more or less suggesting that this blockade of Cuba is wrong and is illegal and should stop. And Barbados can do it if many other islands in the Caribbean who are, again, much more sensitive to U.S. foreign policy and foreign policy decisions have no resources like oil and gas that Trinidad does to rely on, that rely very much on tourism coming from where it's the United States, right? Where a simple travel advisory can really hurt islands like St. Lucia, Barbados, and so on. I think Trinidad has it within its power to have a backbone. Sorry.
Jair, what are your thoughts? I kind of know what they are, but I still want to hear them.
No, is a very reasonable question, and is a acceptable question. I don't see it as being a devil's advocate. It's a reality. Economic interest, a country has to look out for their economic interests, whether it be personal economic interests or the country's economic interests. So that is where their focus is at. That they see their allegiance or their connection to the USA as one where they can benefit their country economically. And as I said, going back to the Shield of Americas, what essentially is the Shield of Americas? And fundamentally, the Prime Minister of Trinidad did mention that the Caribbean was not a zone of peace, and that
Yeah,
goes against the grain. That goes against the grain of all of our fundamental beliefs within the region. So if she is believing that the Caribbean is not a zone of peace, and she's linking what is happening, her crime situation, her local domestic crime situation, and connecting it to the region, then that is a challenge. And to this date, we're still seeing the U.S. Up to yesterday, they took out a fishing boat once again, and I think four people died just yesterday or day before. So we gotta see things for what they are, and she's not speaking about those things. So honestly, I don't see an issue in if a country is taking the approach where I am going to gain economically, but to what expense? That is where then my next question then comes. To what expense am I going to gain economically? Are my people being
Are
disenfranchised?
you really going to? It's very short term. Like look at
Yes,
what's happened.
that's
Look at
it.
what's happened since um, the vice president, now president of Venezuela, Rodriguez. She's now Trump's best friend. Or is the Trump administration really going to decide in Trinidad's favor with respect to oil and gas fields that are in dispute between Trinidad and Venezuela? That's probably not going to happen to the same extent because Venezuela has more to offer than Trinidad ever will. So it's very short sighted. And even if they were to decide in Trinidad's favor, that's the Trump administration. And a future, I don't know, Kamala Harris administration, to my lips, hopefully to God's ears, a future Democratic leader of America would probably make very different decisions as it pertains to what's happening there. And how on earth is Trinidad going to defend their offshore gas and oil interests against a Venezuela that is unfettered and unshackled? Impossible. So I think it's very short-sighted.
Yeah, but and Terry, to add to your point as well, is that a lot of people fundamentally believe that this is their last chance with Trump in administration, who hold those very, I don't want to say radical beliefs, but who hold to those philosophies or those mindsets. They believe that this is their last chance to gain for a very long time, because when the next U.S. elections comes around, we won't see a similar person to Trump at the head. So Israel is taking advantage of it. The quote unquote colonial powers are taking advantage of Trump being in office. The radicalists across the US who have beliefs on certain races and what's not, they're taking advantage of it. So similarly in the region, that's going to spread throughout the world. So as you were mentioning, it's a very short term view, but to what end? To what end? That is the challenge, and it's a sad, it's a very no, it's a very sad state. Think really and truly thinking about it. It's a very sad state for the region right now.
Yeah, I agree. I like to just give us a little more. I agree to an extent. In terms of CARICOM, we are still a little more independent than other Euro unions like the European Union, right? The European Union, that we can probably say Trinidad might be a bit of a vassal state. They've subjected themselves to vassalage with respect to U.S. foreign policy, but almost the entire European Union has done that, right? So when it comes to much more powerful individual nation states, they too have subjected themselves to U.S. foreign policy adventures. They too, in terms of the European Union, and we have this guy Rutte, who is more or less, and he's supposed to be some chairman there. He's more or less subservient to Trump, right? And we have the European Union, their leaders making pronouncements that are totally inconsistent with the opinions of the individual nation states, right? So many of them they're actually supporting the misadventures in particularly the present one in Iran, and people like Rutte and these people are more or less saying that we should suspend international law. Imagine that. Imagine the people in the European Union saying that, after preaching about international law and human rights for the last, I don't know, years, and beyond, they're now saying, oh no, in the special case of Iran, we should suspend it because this is somehow better for the Iranian people or better for the world. Who knows what they actually really think? But of course, we knew when we saw what happened in Gaza, we knew that international law was a farce to begin with. So yeah. But at least we are more in slight defense of CARICOM. We at least have a more independence, even though one or two of our member states, literally one or two, are somewhat pursuing other interests.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody asked me the other day, why are we giving Guyana a pass? I mean, I feel like we have to give Guyana a pass. I feel like Guyana, there's some things that we don't like, but I'll get into that. But I'll let you guys going first. What are your thoughts on Guyana? Tahir?
Well, Ghana, from an economic standpoint, is ready for takeoff.
Uh-huh.
They have long-standing issues with Venezuela. I think which was sorted very reasonably last year, if it was in St. Vincent, where the foreign heads came together and with the stakeholders from the government from Venezuela at that time, and they dealt with it in a very respectful, decent manner. And I think that is how it shows that the Caribbean is a zone of peace. and their viewpoint on Cuba has been similar to ours as well, and it is a middle ground approach,
Yeah.
which is fair in this time. From an economic standpoint, they're ready for takeoff. Are the people of Guyana, are they ready for this influx of this economic empowerment that is taking place in this country? I know I've been to Guyana a few years ago, and there's definite need and there's definite skill shortage. I know the government of Barbados was helping in training lots of Guyanese in
We have a
hospitality
lot
as
of cooperation with Ghana, lots of
Mhm.
cooperation. But continue.
Yeah, in hospitality especially, and they can essentially position themselves as a breadbasket of agriculture in the Caribbean. The challenge, however, though, is that the people out there, they're just comfortable in making what they're making, and that is where now we have to grow and really, I don't want to say use Guyana, but Guyana has to see themselves as a big player in agriculture for the region, and that helps with our sustainability as well, especially and lessens the reliance on the US and England for our food import bill. And I know there was talk about Barbados being a hub, where Guyana is the shipment point, Barbados is the packaging center, and we ship to the rest of the Eastern Caribbean region. So from an economic standpoint, they're ready for takeoff. Their standpoints recently, they have to. I don't think that they essentially have a choice with the deal that they signed for the oil. Is either they're gonna choose a route which will benefit them, or else. That's just how the world order is. That is just how the world order is. And if you go back to history, and similarly in Iran, similarly in Venezuela, we saw what happens. So
So
I
we
think
definitely giving Ghana a pass. Yeah, right, Terry. We definitely giving Ghana. I look at the
Yeah,
Ghana
no.
situation a little differently. I didn't
Mhm.
think I feel like Imran is doing what he has to do. But there are things that he doesn't have to do that he did, like why he go up there and all these photo shoots and stuff. That part I was like, hey buddy, we don't need to carry it that far. I understand you want to play the game, but that part you could have leave out, Sign your
I think,
treaties, get your money, but that part was a little bit. But yeah, I agree. I'm giving Ghana a pass right now.
yeah,
Tell me, Terry?
me too, me too. I think Ghana deserves it, and we understand. Maybe if Venezuela was claiming half of Barbados, I would feel very much antagonistic towards Venezuela as well. But I think Ghana played that well, and of course they had that long-standing challenge. They still did not play a significant role, at least not the same role that Trinidad played
Yeah.
in what happened, right? And I
At
think
least
that
didn't get
is,
Caribbean people killed, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think that's forever to, and you could more understand Ghana doing that than
Yeah.
Trinidad, right? You could
Yeah.
more understand that happening. But so I think that's forever to their benefit. We know the deal they have with respect to the offshore oil and gas, and that of course puts some limits on what they are prepared to do vis-a-vis antagonizing United States. And but I think we have to say that the President Ali, I think he's been very good for the most part. Maybe the photo ops in America may not have been his idea, but and may not have been a good idea. But yeah, I think I do give Guyana much more credit in terms of how they have played the most recent um, set of circumstances that have been unfolding in the Caribbean. Again, not of their choosing.
So then we're agreeing that as small island developing states that we have to more or less balance um, our principal solidarity with Cuba then against the United States. But what are some of the ways that we can do that? How can we balance the the principle that Cuba is one of us? We're gonna assist Cuba because Cuba has always been there for the Caribbean. I can't think of a time in history when Cuba wasn't there for for the region. Just the other day with COVID, I don't know how we would have gotten through COVID without Cuba at the end of the day. I mean, how do we balance the fact that we owe Cuba? There's nothing else that we can say against that. We owe Cuba. That's just the bottom line. How do we balance that with the pressure from the United States?
Well, I think with respect to that, like we should try to deepen our people to people ties. Clearly, there can be no objections for that because Tahir mentioned it before. You just got to look at the human condition and the human effects of this embargo and how it affects just babies at the hospital, babies in incubators. Can you imagine you don't having
We
electricity and
care
babies?
about those things. Marco Rubio and Donald Trump don't care about the human factor.
We get it. Yeah, that's pretty much clear. But yeah, but those things aren't objectionable. So if deepening the humanitarian cooperation with Cuba, because as you just said, Cuba has always been there for us from a humanitarian perspective, especially and even beyond. And the people to people ties, I don't think those things we can't object to them, right? It's very difficult for the United States president and government to object to humanitarian assistance to Cuba. That's very hard. It's almost impossible to do that because even the most hawkish of Cuban exiles in Florida is probably not against feeding babies formula, right? So these are the avenues that we have, and I think we are exploiting them at this point in time to try to be there for Cuba. Yes, there are certain things that we are going to be inhibited from doing. There are certain things we're not going to want to do for our own interests. For instance, like we wouldn't want many of our banks to get sanctioned as a result of transferring safe funds. We wouldn't want to expose many our businesses to the risk of sanction. But definitely when it comes to just the governments cooperating and organizing humanitarian shipments to Cuba, organizing things like deepening our people-to-people ties in education, in sports, in healthcare. I don't think those things are really objectionable, and it's very difficult, like I said before, for the United States government to object to it. It's going to be very difficult for them to oppose, even though they will not like it. And we agree that we're not dealing with people who are, let's just be generous and say that nice. Is not politically feasible for them to object to it.
Tahir?
Yeah, no, I totally wholeheartedly agree with Terry on that front. The fact is that as we go through this time, this Trump administration time, it is going to become exceedingly difficult to find that balance. That balance will be extremely difficult day in and day out because they're essentially going to continue to squeeze economies, squeeze trade, squeeze tourism, squeeze in every aspect of how we are able to function. Not they, as Terry said, they're not gonna fundamentally disagree with sending humanitarian. They may fundamentally disagree with sending humanitarian aid, but they cannot stop it. But they're going to squeeze in the other areas. So finding that balance is going to be extremely difficult. But there are ways, as Terry mentioned, that we can show solidarity, show support, and we cannot forget the people of Cuba. We cannot forget the people of Venezuela. We cannot forget the people that have been there for us within the region. And once again, going back to history, we got to constantly look at what has built us historically. And something, a statement that stays very close to my heart is that people who don't know where they come from don't know where they're going. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the region were not educated enough, and that's perhaps a whole other conversation about the education system and how our education system is set up. And that's where I feel a lot of our fundamental views are shaped and formed. And that's where we need education reform immediately. And how we be truly educated about our region. And we know that for a long time now, the Cuban counterpart has been participating in AgroFest, in various trade missions. Venezuela has been included as well. So we've been there to assist and to show. And there's lots of creative, innovative products, services coming out of these countries and some very exceptional people as well. I had the opportunity to travel to Venezuela for the elections in 2024, and that was an experience in itself because I went there with a certain level of expectation, based on what the media and the Western media specifically was showcasing, but it was the total opposite. You know, they were mentioning that access to food, access to pharmaceuticals is a challenge. No, people liming, people cooling, like how they explained it and the reality on the ground when we got there was a total different thing. And this is now where we have to truly, I'm a person that I would say I'm educated decently about these things. But even that, it showed me then how the media shapes
Yeah,
mindsets and
none
shapes
of us.
fears.
Yep.
Yeah, so my sister who was on this program as well as you reminded me, Ayo, she went to Cuba as well. And she shared similar sentiments as well. Yes, they had the challenges with the electricity and stuff, but she went about 2 years ago, and she said she had an amazing experience. So from a tourism standpoint, even we often look to the Western world as the space, and they are often the judges of they're the judges, sorry, of which political system is working and what is not. But their political system is at its end. In Britain, if you look at the political system since Brexit,
Don't get me
every
started. Don't get me started on this.
no, we you
Go
see
right
how
ahead. Go
you
right
see
ahead.
how connected it all is, and people can't. I have a challenge where people can't connect these issues together. If we look at since Brexit, how many prime ministers has sat in number 10 Downing Street? And if God forbid if Barbados was to change prime ministers 10 times in a year, what would happen? They would say, "Oh, we are politically unstable. We have challenges." Look at the healthcare within Britain. I know of,
Yeah.
of cases where family members have gone there to visit for other family members. They got sick, they went in hospital, and the waiting time is longer than the QH hospital. There's no air condition. There's fans. There's a significant challenge. But if we then look at our healthcare, we look at garbage, we look at the food on the shelves and all that, and we look at the US, Capitol Hill was stormed. Let us not forget that a few years ago. So we gotta really take things into context and educate ourselves. We can't be so blinded all the time.
Late
But
stage
we getting
capitalism.
started, we getting hot, man. We getting too hot now, man.
Late
I really
stage
like
capitalism,
like what
Kaya.
you said about that education aspect, because you're right. Our people don't really know the history of our region that well. You were on Cuba, but even with respect to Venezuela, how many of our people know who Solomon Bolivar was, right? In terms of the Bolivarian Republic, how many people understand that many of the Afro-Caribbean people of the time throughout the from Haiti back through the island chain, that they participated in that revolution to essentially free not just Venezuela but much of South America from under the Spanish colonial yoke. Like, people don't really know that.
Yep.
There's a very famous Saint Lucian, John Baptiste Bedeau, who
Yes.
participated in that revolution as well and saved Solomon Bolivar. How many people know that? How many people in Saint Lucia actually know that one of their citizens was played a fundamental role in freeing all of South America from Spanish rule, and Venezuela included, so but also Bolivia, like Colombia, all these states, right? How many people know this, right? And therefore the connection that we have, because like I said, Caribbean peoples went to Venezuela and helped fight to free all of South America from Spanish colonial rule. How many of us know that, right? How many of us know these connections?
And
So
over
this is
time,
important. Mhm.
how much help Venezuela has given to Barbados. I mean, obviously in the region, but Barbados in terms of
Yeah,
housing, pharmaceuticals, you name it,
Carib.
this actually
petrochemical.
informs this actually informs why the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela has such a permissive attitude towards the region, because we help them, they help us,
Yeah.
and but yeah, so there are connections all throughout.
And we go further. Every other Barbadian going to Panama for vacation, but how many Barbadians know that Barbadians built the Panama Canal?
Yes, true.
Hundreds and thousands of Barbadians.
Was part of them. I went over there.
Yep.
Yeah, my mother is called Teresita for a reason, right? So yeah.
So this is the
Yeah,
education.
there's a great connection throughout the region. We can't overlook that. We can't, and it shouldn't be ignored really. And now we see Cuba also coming into the mix because Cuba has SEPTA as more or less a logistics hub for the humanitarian aid that CARICOM is sending to Cuba. Um, is this backdoor diplomacy the new standard for survival for a country like Cuba, and now with the US doubling down on sanctions and so forth?
I wouldn't necessarily call it backdoor diplomacy. That's a word that the U.S. wants us to use, but it's called strategic diplomacy. Let's just be strategic, and we have to be strategic in every single approach
That's
every
all.
single thing that we do in this thing,
Hmm.
and smart in our approaches and smart in our decision making. And if we're not smart, we're gonna face challenges.
Hmm. And I like that. I like that correction to strategic diplomacy. You're absolutely correct there. What are your thoughts on that, Terry? Is that gonna do we have to go and now with the let's go a little bit more international because I know Terry you're more into the global perspective. With let's stay on this whole strategic diplomacy vein with the middle powers and so forth. Like what talk about that a little bit for me.
Well, as Tahir said, we don't want to use the
Mhm.
terminology of the oppressors, right? We don't
Yeah,
really want
I
to
know.
use it. Right? So we don't want to use that terminology. We're
He's
not in
right.
anybody's
Absolutely right.
backyard. We're not in anybody's backyard. This is not
And
backdoor
100% right.
diplomacy. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But so you asked another question with respect to the the quote unquote middle powers. Mark Carney gave a speech that reeked of hypocrisy, but he got a lot of plaudits for it. I don't know why. But yeah, they're beyond the Caribbean, taking a broader look at what's going on in Europe, particularly at this point in time. They haven't joined with the US in this illegal invasion of Iran. So they're trying to have more or pursue what did Mark Carney call it? Values-based foreign policy was the phrase that he referred to this as.
yeah.
Um, is yet to be determined what the values actually are. I have an idea of what one of the values might be, but I'm not going to mention that here. But we definitely know it reeks of a lot of hypocrisy. But yeah, they're going to have to pursue their own interests as opposed to subjecting much of their foreign policy interests to the interests of the United States. This is definitely the case, and we of course have to follow suit. I think that in our case, it is important, of course, from a realist perspective, we're quite close to America, and there are certain things that it would not be in our interest to do because of that big gorilla that's right next to us, who's going to be very upset if we do certain things, but we can operate around that. So, for instance, maybe having closer connections, economic connections with, say, China, that will be in our interest. And of course, that's happening in broader field, right? They're deepening connections with countries like Germany and China. They're now realizing, hey, we really shouldn't be we already cut off ourselves from our gas and oil by cutting off Russia. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to cut off ourselves from like 2 billion people in China. Maybe that's not a good idea, right? I mean, just saying, right? So we should be also trying to deepen connections with these other poles in a multipolar world, and just try to have some type of, I guess, hedge where if our traditional partners, U.S. included, we're very critical of some of the decisions made by the Donald Trump administration, but United States is a different thing altogether, and of course we have very close connections, people to people, economic connections with the people of America. So we have very close connections with them. But if anything negative were to unfold as a result of what's currently happening in their governance, then we need to have some type of hedge and maybe deepening connections with other poles. Same European Union, despite the hypocrisy there. Same Canada, despite the hypocrisy there, and maybe also China and elsewhere. I think that's where we should look, and I think that's what they are doing themselves.
Batumi saying Carney was calling water wet. Big revolutionary talking. But like I say, the global south have not been knowing that the international order was a farce.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, yeah.
yeah, Batumi, don't let me get blocked from the internet though. So
I think blocked for sure. This episode is gonna get us blocked.
we're definitely gonna get flagged.
I'm
Oh boy.
sorry.
But I mean, it is what it is. We the truth is there to be spoken about, and that's what we do on this program. So
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is what it is.
it's about to what about me is saying, imagine standing up and saying, hey, we knew international law was a farce all along, and but we went along with it because it was in our interest. And no, that is not in our interest because Trump is threatening to take Greenland. Um, to hell with it. Like what? Come on, guys. You told us you were pushing this down our throats like human rights and international law and all this type of thing. And now all of a sudden, now that Trump threatens to take out almost like very likely inhabited island that is in the Western Hemisphere that Trump is saying it would improve America's national security, and he's right about those things. Actually, right? It would improve their national security to take over Greenland. I think it should go for it. But anyway, in all seriousness, yeah, all of a sudden, international law is bad and is a farce, and we should move on. You just watched what happened in Gaza. You watched what happened in Venezuela. You said nothing, but oh no, he's coming after Greenland. This is the end of international law.
Yeah. I mean, there's something else I wanted to talk about. How do we feel about Rubio pitching this 21st century cooperation framework to the region to replace the Caribbean Basin Initiative? Like, I mean, how do we feel about that? Do we feel like it's a move to force CARICOM to distance itself with from Cuba?
Terry, you can go first.
Well, I don't know much about it, to be honest with you. I I I think the details are yet to be seen. So, Ayo, do
Mhm.
you have any details on it? I don't have much to say about it.
Well, that's the thing. When it comes to the Trump administration, they're always scarce on details, aren't they? But my question would be this: why
Mm.
would we want the United States, of all people, to set up to replace one of our frameworks? Why would we want them to be the people to say to us, "This is the framework you're going to operate under"? They're offering it as a partnership, but I mean,
Look, I guess
aren't we
it's late on
covering it?
details. We have to get the details and try to, I guess, exploit where we can exploit and maneuver where we can maneuver around it. I don't think it's going to inhibit our ability to be ourselves. But of course, this is symptomatic of a retrenchment of the United States in the Western Hemisphere and their attempt to gain a better grip on what's happening in our part of the world. And of course, we have to be aware that that's what's going on. And where it's not in our interests, just don't pursue policy that's consistent with things that aren't in our interest. Right? I think that's what we need to do. And of course, it's in our interest to be able to trade with each other, to have people to people connections, to have humanitarian relationships among each other, sporting relationships among each other. These things are and beyond that, so these things are in our interest, and we should pursue our interests in a multipolar world.
Tyre?
Yeah, I don't have much information. I was trying to pull up some stuff on the internet. Well, you asked the question. But I think this is just part of the new world order that they want to create. Um, part of creating a system where they're in control. It's part of the 21st century colonialism.
Hmm.
I think that we got to see things for it is. The greatest relationships come in the form of wanting a partnership. Greatest relationships for the better and greater relationships for the worse.
Yeah. And speaking about sovereignty, um, like if the U.S. continues to threaten the for this is a quite some time that the U.S. has been threatening the Caribbean due to its relationships with countries like Cuba and China and even Russia. Um, because we've been there too. What is a realistic way for the Caribbean to maintain its independence, to maintain its sovereignty now in these times?
It starts within. It has to start within. We gotta first of all look to become more sustainable in everything that we do, from manufacturing to agriculture. We see our food import bill is extremely high. Um, Even our identity, our Caribbean identity. What is that Caribbean identity? What does that national identity look like? Well, as a Barbadian, what does our national identity look like? Our Prime Minister often talks about what does a Bajan citizen look like? What is the average? What is a Barbadian? Who is a Barbadian at its core? You know, so I think we lack true identity in the region, and we often adopt many cultures from the Western world. And this is now where we have to build up our own systems. I remember, I think it was CLR James who mentioned in his writing, or Sir Hilary Beckles, that we have adopted the colonial system within all across our sectors, and those same countries have now gone past that system and transformed, but we still have it. So even look at the 11 plus, look at our public sector, look at throughout our system, how our system is structured. It is still very much set up in the way that it was years ago. So we have to essentially look to start within, and it starts from our setting up our system. Where we're still not very much dependent on them, and that is where we can become self-sustainable. And then where they come with their proposals or offers, we then have a bit more leverage because we're not so dependent on them. So for example, if God forbid something was to happen, and the US said, well, we're not sending any more food to Barbados, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our tourism product? What's going to happen to our supermarkets? What's going to happen to our entire system? We're going to be in a uproar because majority of our food imports come from the US. So how now do we band together as a region um, to become more self-sustainable? And I know many people say that that is something that will never happen, but I am confident. I am very, very confident that it can happen, but there's a definite need of political will for it to happen. And we can't be territorial in our mindsets as it relates to our own country. We have to look at the broader region. And I think between, I would say, 2018 and 2023, that I saw a very united front from CARICOM on lots of issues. We saw the I think it was 25 by 25, lessening the food import bill of like 25% across the region. And there were steps taken to do that, where Ghana was supposed to be is supposed to be the breadbasket of the region. And we saw steps in other directions, and similarly what happened last year, the freedom of movement, the I can't remember the exact bill, which the Prime Minister brought forward where persons can work. And how many countries jumped onto it? How many countries truly jumped onto it? And these are initiatives that we have to take. So beyond UE, beyond West Indies cricket, we really have to look at other avenues to unite as a region. And that's where we can definitely become more sustainable, and where we can become more of a force to reckon with.
Do you think, Tyre, that we need younger leaders if we are to get bolder and do some of these things that we know need to be done?
If you asked me that question a year ago, I would say yes, we need younger
I do
leaders.
for prime. Huh?
But I wouldn't say that we need younger leaders. We need leaders with the right mindset that understand the system and the context in which we're working in, understanding the system and the world that we are functioning in. And unfortunately, I would say even some of my fellow young leaders, Unfortunately, they don't quite understand the system and the context. So then they just fall in line in terms of the similar thought processes and mindsets that are following. And for example, we see it within our own prime minister. She is leaps and bounds ahead.
I
They
guess
cut
there you
him
go.
already. Look,
Yeah, they cut him
I
off.
tell
Cut
y'all,
him
I
off.
tell y'all, y'all can start getting.
Yeah,
Tell you, they
yeah.
start getting targeted.
Getting banned now from Facebook and every place else. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I think we got the
The gist.
response from Tahir, and yeah, and also like just to piggyback on what he was saying and to you know bring this back up, as Batimi is saying online, and as he's pretty much saying, we need to deepen our integration. I think that's very important, um, because collectively we are much stronger than we are individually. And as Tahir was saying, if God forbid, the U.S. decides not to send food to the Caribbean, but it doesn't take them for them to decide not to send food to the Caribbean. Just imagine. I mean, we're. Can you imagine a scenario where there's a global conflagration? I mean, we're having this war that we never thought we would have in Iran. It doesn't take much for things to get even worse. And if there is ever a time when there's this global conflagration, with all the goodwill in the world, and all the money in the world, even if we have all the money, we will not be able to buy the food, right? Because they will not send it to us. Look at what's happening, with respect to the Strait of Hormuz and the fact that things like we know that oil and gas isn't getting through, but fertilizer isn't getting through. Do you know what that means? That means that China has just decided that it's not exporting fertilizer, and the ingredients to make fertilizer to Australia. Australia actually imports ingredients to make fertilizer from China, and China has decided it's not doing that. So, and of course, this is now spring in the northern hemisphere. This is the planting season, and if farmers aren't receiving fertilizer in order to plant, then
Threatens food security.
how are you going to get any food? It's important for us to deepen our integration, as Tahir was saying, and to uh, become more resilient in that way, and maybe develop, maybe move off of these petrochemicals, and move off of gas and oil, and maybe move towards a more sustainable future with respect to the greening of the economy, solar cells and solar power, wind power, and so on, so that we are not as sensitive to external shocks, like Trump deciding to start a war and blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and then wondering what happened. How is this Strait of Hormuz not unblocked yet? It was supposed to be a 2-day war, right? So things like that.
Welcome back, Tahir.
Yeah, it wasn't the bots knocking us off. It was a call coming through. And surprisingly, it was my good friend, Adrian Green, who often talks about the same thing. I was mentioning just now about understanding the system and understanding certain stuff. So I heard the back end of Terry's comments, and absolutely that's it. That's where we have to go. And as just to finish answer the question, um, we I see a lot of other younger people unfortunately take up similar mindsets the to the mindsets that we're trying to change, or that we start on the premise of changing. They get into the system and then just continue. So that's how things are then passed on from generation to generation to generation. So I think do we need younger leaders? Yes, we do. But do we equally need leaders with the correct mindsets? That is where we have to go.
I totally agree with you, and I would say that when we talk about our prime minister, we have to remember that she's an anomaly in her age group. Yeah, always
Mhm.
remember that. But that's where we are. Want to look at some other points. Um, what does the let's go back to the topic of this this program, this episode. What does a multipolar world actually mean for Barbados? And we say that practically? What does it mean practically, not theoretically?
Perhaps we
And
should probably
Terry,
define what we mean by multipolar world in the first instance, right?
so I'll let you
Um,
do that then. Yeah.
okay, I was hoping you would do that. But yeah, so of course, we have unipolarity. United States coming out of World War II, more or less being dominant, hegemonic power on the planet, and we're now moving away from that unipolar world to a world where we have multiple poles. I mean, we have multiple emerging regional powers, Russia, China in Asia, um, European Union, South Africa, Brazil. These different countries, represent the emergence of what is being termed a multipolar world, where we no longer have this unipolar, hegemonic dominance of the United States, and we have a shared system where we have multiple centers. So this is what we mean by multipolarity. Where does the Caribbean sit, and where does Barbados sit within this? Of course, we're very much in the Western Hemisphere, so we're very much well within the United States sphere of influence, if you're going to use that other term, foreign
Good
policy
term.
term. So we're well within the United States sphere, but of course, in multipolarity, there is the ability to play off the multiple poles against each other to pursue our own interests. Of course, being very much in the United States in the Western Hemisphere, in the United States sphere, it doesn't mean that we are unable or inhibited to do certain things. Like we wouldn't want to pursue certain options that are available that might be seen as threatening to the United States security, because of course, in a realist world, America is essentially, this is not meant as a pejorative term, but a big gorilla, and you don't want to upset that big gorilla. So we wouldn't want to pursue, in the case of Barbados and Caribbean, we wouldn't want to pursue security and military ties too much with these multiple poles. But with respect to things like education, with respect to economic ties, with respect to other areas, healthcare and so on, we do have the optionality to play these multiple poles off of each other to get better resourcing, financing, better trade conditions, better optionality for ourselves. And this is what we should be looking at. So, like, just to repeat, we don't really want to, maybe sell China a port. I would be totally against that, or any dual use asset, or asset that can be interpreted as or framed, because that's pretty much what happens. These things get framed in a particular way. But we would want to bring them in, as we are doing, to help build things like hotels, schools, and so on, and to build our optionality there. So that's my piece on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is what I think the Prime Minister of Barbados is attempting to do a lot more of. I think she's reaching out to partners in the global south a lot more, in more ways that we've seen happen before. But we're getting pushback from our own people on that.
Yeah.
What about that, Tyre?
Okay.
Sorry.
No, Terry can go first. Terry, go first.
Oh, Tyre.
No, Tyre, you can go ahead.
Before I answer that question, we saw between perhaps the early 2000s to, I would say, to last year, the beginning of the shift, or the shift in the world order, the world power. So we saw the shifts going away from the US, from Europe, to now the Middle East. For example, UAE. We're looking at Asia across China, India, Japan. And then if you look towards Africa, the emergence of Rwanda, Ghana, Nigeria. These countries have Saudi Arabia as well, another country which has come out as a global powerhouse. So we saw the shift in the world powers taking place. I know this is where now in this time they're recalling. They're trying to bring back home the chickens, The chickens have gone and fled the world and got prosperity. So now it's time to bring back the chickens home. But
The eggs.
yeah, to bring back the egg. So to function in this world. And as you mentioned in your last point, the prime minister did that, where she started foreign relations with with across the Arab world, across Africa, and it was bringing significant benefit to us. Remember, in 2022, we had the first Afri Investment Forum here in Barbados. We had over 1,000 persons from across the world coming to Barbados to attend something which was so beautiful, which brought significant benefit to the Caribbean. Now we're seeing the setting up of the Afri-Exim Bank in Barbados, which is going to bring tremendous economic prosperity to the region. And then also we saw the formation of the embassy in the UAE, building out of obtaining grants from Saudi Arabia, from India as well. So we saw that we're now lessening our reliance on one tourism, but also growing our economic relations and diplomatic relations globally. But the pushback from the people once again goes back to how our education system is set up. I've
Mm-hmm.
sat in positions where through my day-to-day job where persons still see, oh wait, in Africa when they're telling me we doing business with Africans, well, Africa ain't got the internet. And I sit there baffled, annoyed, frustrated with these persons that are in key influential positions within our public sector, and they hold to these views. Similarly, within relations with the Middle East, oh well, we can't do business with Muslims. You can't trust Muslims, and they hold up to a certain belief as well. They hold to the belief that our foreign policy and our economic relations is built through Europe, through white Europe, and through white America. And this is a challenge in some quarters. And I know the Prime Minister has been trying to shift that. And that is where earlier I mentioned on the education system. How are we educated? What are we being educated on? And this is where I would say a lot of our mindsets are formed, and a lot of our challenges are also formed within the Caribbean, and more specifically to Barbados. We have a very qualified workforce, but I often say we have a lot of graduates come out of UAE. Even some of my colleagues, they struggle to function in a workplace. They struggle to function in just functioning in the world. What are the skills that are needed? And if we look at the World Economics Forum's outlook for 2030, Terry, you notice very well, what are the skills that are they're looking for? Technology, conflict resolution. Those success skills are quote unquote soft skills. That is what is gonna be needed in this time. So this is where my challenge comes, and this is where then you see these mindsets and these beliefs holding firm, as you mentioned, and the pushback happening within the public sector, within Barbados. And I remember, I'm sure you saw the comments. You're I remember the comments when the announcement of the Afri Exim Bank coming to Barbados. That should be a proud moment for us as a Caribbean people. That should be a very, very, very proud moment. I am not of African descent, but I'm a Caribbean person, and you could perhaps hear the passion in my voice and the vigor in my voice. I'm of Indian descent, and similarly, my grandfather would speak about when the British used to rule in India, and Mahatma Gandhi would doing what he was doing. So I hold firm to those standards. So should be a proud moment that we have a major international African bank setting up in Barbados, and we should be proud of that. I remember the Prime Minister made a very point important point back then. We don't want to frame this conversation around her, but it's the thoughts are flowing that she said, we did business with Africa for the wrong reasons. Now it's time to do business with Africa for the right reasons. And so let us not make it difficult when it has been done for over 400 years successfully for the wrong reasons. So now it's time to do it for the right reasons. I could
Yeah.
go on about this for a very long time, as you can
We
probably
can tell,
hear,
we can
but
tell you're
And I
passionate
will
about it.
allow you to, because you're,
education, man.
because
Education
you're
is it.
absolutely correct.
I wanna add just one. You're right about the education aspect of things, Tahir, but uh, we need to ask ourselves a couple additional questions. How are adults educated? Well, we need to take a look at our information space and ask ourselves a couple questions about the propaganda that is allowed to find itself into our space unfiltered, right? Um, I particularly am thinking about one news station in coming out of the United States, Fox News, right? And why is this? And this Fox News is very popular in Barbados. And of course, if people are watching this day in a constant diet of this particular channel, and there are other channels, of course, then it should not be a surprise that they have these views. And we need to think about it. I'm not saying ban it, although no,
I've
maybe
been
I am.
saying for years that we should just ban it from our
Yeah,
areas.
yeah,
I mean, we all
yeah.
like to think I'm extreme, but sometimes you need to do extreme
We
things to get
know
good
that you're
results.
extreme, but but sometimes, as you said, sometimes you need people to be in the
Just ban
vanguard
it. Where are we
of
filling
change, right?
our people's head with
But
nonsense?
But Terry,
what I would
would you say the younger people are still getting their information from traditional news sources? That I want to hear
this
your
is
views on that.
this is where shows like this are contributing. So we have non-traditional, as you pointed to, Tiger, non-traditional sources of news and information now coming to the fore, and so the younger people are have slightly more cultivated views as opposed to these backward views that are emanating from stations like, and we're going to get banned again, Fox News, right? So this is my main issue. And so in terms of those um, sources of media that are pretty much responsible for the indoctrination of the old, not necessarily our schools, although we can do some work in the schools and the universities, but we need to really take a really close look at the information space on the island and in our region, and ask ourselves, are we really surprised that our people have these negative views towards Africa when we don't educate them differently? We don't have a news environment or a media environment that does that, and we allow in this constant diet of, what I would term hate and archaic views, particularly as it pertains to Africa and the Middle East, of course, and so on, right? So,
I mean, we've had a lot of conversations, Terry, you and I, on the manosphere and how it plays into these racist tropes. And we can't ignore
mhm,
that either. And that's also on the internet. That's not, I mean, yeah, Fox News might be one of the um what's the word they're looking for, progenitors or whatever of that, but we can't ignore
mhm.
how that plays into the whole
Very good
misinformation
point.
and the
And this
miseducation
ties into what Tahir was saying with
of
respect to
very young
the new
people.
media. So some of the new media, not all of the new media is good, right? So we do have to contend with the manosphere and
Mhm.
Joe Rogan and these people who are, they are reciting, they're trying to suggest that, they are, for the young guys and helping them to be more manly and blah, blah, blah. And really, they're just trying to indoctrinate them with a lot of right wing
Mhm.
views that are anti-woman in the first instance, anti-black,
Anything that isn't white.
yeah, anything that isn't a white straight male. Yeah. So this is the problem that we also are having among the younger people.
What about the
And
algorithm?
Yeah,
mhm.
and the thing about these algorithms is that they're geared towards making you fixate, right? So the people that own Google, own YouTube, sorry, Google, and people that own Facebook. Zuckerberg, who was recently convicted of crimes, I would say crimes against humanity, but it wasn't actually that,
Mhm.
but it could as well have been that. These algorithms don't really care what they are showing you. All they want you to do is to fixate, right? They just want you to spend more time on these systems, so they will take you in one or two directions, either to the far left or to the far right. They're going to take you in always in the direction of strong emotions. And what is the strongest emotion? It turns out, I know people that say love is stronger than hate, but unfortunately, I don't know that I actually believe that. Hate is a lot stronger, and hate causes people to fixate, and so these algorithms just take you in a direction towards some type of hate, unfortunately.
Mhm.
To hate is to love.
But the algorithms are also important because I remember Terry when you went checking out some of these very prolific um, guys in the manosphere. When I was telling you
What's his
about
name?
these guys,
What's his name now?
yeah,
I
and
try to
then
remember the name.
and then you became inundated by just
On on Instagram. Yeah, this guy, I can't remember his name. Yeah, but yeah, that's how it works, right? So it just tries to
right.
catch you. If it is, hey, oh, that's a male of a particular age. He must like this. Let's give him all that type of information.
Yeah.
So yeah, these things happen, and so
And
yeah, we have to.
he had to forcibly retrain his algorithms after that. So can you imagine somebody who is, let's say, 16 to 25, and they're facing this like every day, all day long, and then that forms their viewpoints on
You going
politics, on
old,
business,
ayo.
huh?
Imagine go younger. Not even 16
Yeah,
to 25 anymore, go
maybe
younger.
13, yeah,
6,
and
7, 8, 9 year olds getting
And
fed
then
everything.
up.
so imagine that being allowed to train your child. By the time that person is 16 years old, there's not much that you can do with that person.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
why
So
so many Gen Alpha and Gen Z are uber conservative right now because of I put a lot of blame on those that the manosphere, like literally.
but you
So,
should
so
also blame on Zuckerberg and the people that own
Of
YouTube.
course, without
Because at the end
without
of
a
the
doubt.
day, they
They're
don't
the people
care.
Yeah.
They don't actually don't care.
Mm.
All they want you to do is spend time, and the best way to get you to spend time on these systems is to get you to watch hate and
Yeah.
yeah, and feel powerful about yourself. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the history of social media, as I'm sure you guys would know, was created by gamblers following the trends in the casinos. So if you
I
go
cannot.
back, yeah,
That's no.
so
I
going if you go back, when they were creating social media, they used the same thing that they use in the casinos. So similarly, in the casino, you come, you go this, you
Oh yeah,
pull,
oh yeah,
you
yeah,
pull. So
yeah,
similarly, what do you
yeah.
do? You
Oh,
keep
so they use the
scrolling.
psychology of the casino. Oh, got
So
you. Yeah.
and then similarly, you come and you refresh and you don't know what you're getting. And you just hoping that is something similar. So
And you
there's an
scroll.
article on it. I'll share it with you guys after. There's a full article and write up about it where the um the history of social media was based on and the research from casinos.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
My knowledge of how social media started, or rather Facebook, was a dating app.
High
Yeah.
five, MSN.
You are on Facebook from the beginning, Ayo. I don't know how
Yeah,
somebody
because
is
I
so.
came over from High Five. I still remember my very first
She's
Facebook
just like, don't
friend.
mind her being
And
critical
every
of social media.
time
No, she's a social
our
media addict. She's addicted to social media. Like I don't understand. Like I am hardly on social media, but this girl is always on social. I can't get it.
tire tire, you know, when somebody opens social media and they watch a video and they share and they move on with their life. I work all day long, every day. It appears as though I'm always on social media.
She's
It's
always on
so
social
far from the
media.
truth.
She's always
Don't
there.
let don't let him guilt trip you, Ayo.
That's because most people are on social
Always
media
causing
not
trouble. Always causing
sharing.
trouble on social media.
They're
Anyway,
just watching,
let's
and I
yeah.
tend to share, so it appears that
Yeah,
way.
But
let's probably get back to the point. Yeah, so on the point of education, yeah, we also have to think about how our young people and I guess our older people are being educated, and media and sources of media. We need to take action and probably corrective steps to help to inculcate them with the values that we would like them to have, and not with values that other people would like us to have. Simple as
so
that.
we live education in 20. I can't imagine what education in 2050 is gonna look like. That's the truth. And
Yeah, it's gonna be AI.
it's gonna be so media messaging, social media is where people are gonna be learning. So similarly,
Mhm.
I have a 1 year old. He's gonna be two in a few days, right? And this is where I say even starts education starts from even before the baby is born. And that's a whole nother conversation, a whole separate conversation, whole separate philosophy there.
Mhm.
But for example, he watches Miss Rachel. Y'all maybe if y'all have kids, y'all be familiar with Miss Rachel.
Yeah,
Is a
yeah,
Unfortunately, you see, those things came up before my kids, after my kids were grown up.
after. Okay, she's very a lot of these shows are very, what you call it, stimulating.
Mhm.
Mm.
So Miss Rachel, she's very much more calm and stuff like that. So she does a bit of sign language in her shows as well. So one day he came up to us and he was like, "More, please." So he's now starting to talk. So he keeps doing this, keeps doing this, and he keeps doing this.
Keep signing, yeah.
And he was doing sign language,
You
and it
don't
was
know.
only and we
Yeah.
didn't quite understand what he was doing until we were watching one day with him and we saw her doing this and teaching sign language, and we were like, "Whoa, this is amazing!"
Yeah.
So imagine, and there's kids who I know, they don't get any parental guidance of what they're watching. So similar at night, YouTube just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and keeps moving. And there's this show that came up. It starts good. The wheels on the bus go around and around.
Mm.
All these songs. And then it turned into a point where the baby was beating the parent and all type of thing. And so it starts from that age. Education starts from that age. So if we don't begin to create messaging and within a Barbadian context, bring it back to the point at hand. If we don't create with our Caribbean identity and our Bajan identity and our Bajan values and good morals and values, and I'm not even talking religious values, just morals and values that can put people to become the best citizen or the best person that they can be, we're gonna be struggling. And countries like India and China, they already have their plans for what the 2050 China will look like, and we still barely surviving. But I
No,
just
what
hope,
is what China has protected their information space, right?
yeah.
So they're not allowing themselves and their people to be inculcated with values that you know
Yeah.
they don't want them
Remember,
to.
I told you this already, Terry. I said to you that America, China built TikTok. And they got American children out there dancing on TikTok all day long. But what are their own children doing? They're certainly
So
not
Watching
dancing on TikTok all day long.
watching math videos and
so they
Holding and
they've
building
trained their
clips.
children to be producers and not consumers, and we've trained our children to be consumers and not producers.
It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
how does that fit into a Caribbean framework? A small island state. How does that fit into that? What does that look like for the for the Caribbean itself? In terms of controlling its information, having control over all these things. How does that happen? How do we do
I
that?
think the Horse may have already bolted. Um, so it's going to be very difficult, but we have to begin by awareness and maybe deepening the awareness that that some of these channels, both traditional media and social media, they're not reciting. They're reciting propaganda. A lot of them, right? And of course, people think of propaganda necessarily as a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just they're just reciting certain framings of views and ideas that certain people would like other people to have, and from that perspective, we should be thinking about our own sources of quote unquote propaganda or media that are consistent with what will make us as a people better. And maybe I think promoting those avenues and those types of media more, maybe producing more of our own media that suggests ideas and values are consistent with what we would like our people to have. Maybe that's a part of the path towards a solution. But of course, maybe if we have Prime Minister Ayo next, then maybe we would just have and I for one will vote for that.
Y'all don't
We
want me
will
as
probably
prime minister.
and I vote for it. I live in England, so I definitely would vote for that. But I will come back and campaign and support you. Right. So, but of course, of course, being facetious, but if we were to have leadership that focuses in this area and says, you know what, maybe we should suspend some licenses on some channels that don't make any sense. Maybe that sounds extreme, but we like to believe that in freedom or whatever. But maybe or maybe opening up the information space to other perspectives. Maybe having the Chinese channels in, maybe having Al Jazeera and having other perspectives so that people can see different sources of media and different
And
information, and then
also, yeah.
decide that we can have a broader view of what's going on. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, adding to what you were saying, also build our own and spread
Yeah.
throughout the region, because our own, we need our own voices out there a lot more too. All right, so I think that this has been quite a good show. I don't know how you guys feel about ending a little bit early today.
You got someplace to go? Yo, you got a hot date or something?
She got a hot date with you.
I don't understand where we going. We get through all of it. I don't think we exhausted this
Okay,
topic already. Yo.
all right. I'm just putting it out there for you guys at the
I
open.
am usually the one that wants to leave. I don't get
What time
this.
is it in England now, Terry?
It is
Is
now 4:45
is
here.
is missed at 12. So
Oh
yeah,
my,
we could we could end early.
you
Comfortably.
already
Exactly.
no problem.
Oh, Lord have
No,
mercy.
but
Well,
guys, it was truly a pleasure. I always watch your program from time to time once I can. So it was really a pleasure to come on today and just share. So thank you, Ayo, for accepting my request to come on anytime you wish for me to come on. I think these conversations are important. How do we perhaps get them even on Instagram Live? I don't know if we can spread them. I don't know how we can get a way to get it moving and really get these conversations out there in the schools and the blocks and the communities, you know. And I
yeah.
think you both are doing a really excellent job. And I really pray that for its continued success, you know.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
and I appreciate you. I appreciate young people joining us, because sometimes I'm not sure which demographic we're appealing to.
No, yeah, I'll give you some connections as well because there's lots of persons who want a platform to speak as well.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I've been given opportunities to speak, but there's lots of other young people who are now on their journey, and a space like this where they can learn from you guys, but also make the necessary mistakes now before they get to the bigger stage. You know, because there's a small environment, a relaxed environment where they can grow with Terry, both of you guys who are experienced. And I learned so much from this, from just being with you today. So imagine the learning that is taking place when this goes out there even further, and then other younger people as well. So I really really appreciate it, man. And Terry, I'm hoping to come to England in the summer. So hopefully we can connect if you're not here. So hopefully we can connect then.
Yeah, for sure. Just let me know.
You're in London?
I am in Durham.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I could tell you exactly
Who's
where
up
that
there with the Vikings?
is.
Yeah, I know Durham. I'm familiar with England.
I hear the
Yeah.
same height as them,
Oh,
and it is freezing. So
yeah.
it
It's
is.
not freezing. It's somewhere.
Oh man, summer's
Somewhere in England.
is there.
Yeah, it's very
Cricket is
nice.
starting next month in England.
Cricket. We got next. Oh no! So cricket. Yeah, right. Cricket starting next month. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Any last words from you, Terry? But thank you so much for
Um.
your words, Tahir. Those are kind words, and I appreciate you so much for that.
Yeah. Just to wrap up by saying, thanks for Tahir for being here, and of course, I think it's an important topic. Is a topic that, of course, we cannot do full justice to in just these in the 2 hours that we've been here. But it's a topic we need to think about, because of course we are entering a multipolar world. It is the case that U.S. is engaging in retrenchment, particularly on the Donald Trump administration. The implications it has for us are not necessarily good, and we're going to have to try to triangulate in this multipolar world. We want to be friends to all, satellites of none, where possible, and just friends if not possible, right? So so that's my piece on this. Of course, this discussion is of course going to continue because we are going to be faced with more challenges. Like we already have fishing boats in the region being blown up for transporting, maybe smuggling things that are in fact legal in the United States, right? Most of those boats might be they may be fishing boats. The ones that are engaging in smuggling, maybe smuggling marijuana, which is legal in many states. They may be smuggling guns, which is legal in the United States. So ostensibly, you're murdering people for transporting things that are illegal in your country. They're not transporting fentanyl, at least not the people that are moving between the Caribbean islands. And this is something we got to think about. Like, this is what's going on. Like, do they really understand our region? I don't think they do, or they don't really care. So this is what we're faced with, and things are not necessarily going to get much better. But we have to be smart, and we have to try to triangulate and make the best of not necessarily good situation that we are currently in.
And I agree with you. And if I'm going to close with anything, I would say that as the Caribbean space, that we need to focus a lot more on those things which advances the region. Things like strategic autonomy, regional solidarity, of course, diversified partnerships, resilience first economics, non-alignment with accountability. All of these are the things that I want the Caribbean to focus on. That I want CARICOM to pay more attention to, and I think that there are some areas that are working, but there are many that we've fallen short on, and that we really need to, as a grouping, come together on and move forward as one. So. Thank you all for joining us. As we come to a close, I want to thank Tahir for joining us. Thank you to those of you on the stream who took the time to join us here today. Those of you who shared it with us, your comments, your questions, and so forth. I know that you definitely have choices. And those of you who are here, remember to subscribe now, turn on your notifications. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the page. Invite your friends to join us right here next Sunday. And please, live long and prosper.
Thanks for watching Just Politics, Our World, and YouTube at JP, Our Worldview. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and smash the notification bell so you'll know when we upload new content. Join us next time.